Oh, hello there, my friends. How are you? I have a book for you today. Do you know the song Old MacDonald Had a Farm? Sure you do. Everyone knows that song. Well, today's book is Old MacDonald Had an Apartment House. I never saw this book as a kid, but I read this book to my children when they were small, and I love it. And I'm really thrilled to read it again so that you can enjoy it. It's written by Judith Barrett and it's illustrated by Ron Barrett. So husband and wife made this beautiful book. Maybe that's what they look like in real life. I don't know. All right. So, Old MacDonald lived in a big apartment house with his wife and their dog. He didn't own the building. Fat Mr. Rental did. And Old MacDonald was its super. Now, unless if you're a kid like me that grew up in New York City or maybe some other big cities, you don't know what a super is. But a super is a man who takes care of a building. He is a person who fixes your pipes or he fixes your door. He is the supervisor. The word super is a short form of supervisor. And this man and his wife are the supervisors of the house. They do other jobs too, like if you lose your key or forget your key inside the house, you go down to him and you ask, would he please come up and open the door for you? So he takes care of the building. Well, he also polished the brass knobs of the doors when they were smudgy, and he mopped up the hallways when they got dirty, and he sent up steam when it got cold. Old MacDonald's apartment was on the bottom floor, and it was very, very dark. The windows were covered by a thick, bushy hedge that grew in the front yard. Without sunlight, his wife's tomato plant grew pale and droopy. So here's Mr. MacDonald coming back. He has a fine pipe in his mouth. Do you see that? And he goes over to see his wife. Now, what you're going to notice in this book, everything is black and white, with the exception, you see how her plant is green? She's holding her plant. Her plant is green. It's kind of hard to see, but it's there. So Old MacDonald decided to cut down the hedge in front of the windows. And with all the sunlight that came in, the plant straightened up, grew a few leaves, and even grew a few tomatoes. Look at Old MacDonald working hard. He's working hard, and the plant is thriving on the table. It's getting straighter and stronger, and even has some fruit on it. Some nice new tomatoes. But the spot where the hedge had been looked very empty, so Old MacDonald's wife suggested that they fill it in with her tomato plant. And they did. It grew lots of new leaves and many more tomatoes, and much, much taller. See that? Why not get rid of all the rest of the hedge? Old MacDonald said. Then instead I could plant vegetables in the yard. They're better looking than the hedge, and they're much better tasting too. So he cut the whole hedge down to the ground, and in its place he planted rows of corn and melons and beans and radishes. The fountain became a self-watering pea patch, and the front yard had become a small farm, and the tenants were amazed. That's what it looked like after he started planting everything, after he cut down the hedges. One of the tenants was Mrs. Katz, and she really didn't need 4 rooms anymore. Her children were all grown up, so she moved out. It occurred to old MacDonald then that an empty apartment would be a good place to grow lots more vegetables. So he quickly moved in some soil and proceeded to redecorate it in late vegetarian style. He laid down a carpet of carrots and cabbages, and he put some sweet potatoes where the couch had been, and he stuffed the closet with mushrooms. There's Mrs. Katz leaving her apartment. See the tears in her eyes? All of the good memories she had of this place. And over here, when you see the vegetables, what I would have you appreciate, look at the mushrooms in the closet. Can you see the little bit of brown that the artist has used there? It's not real strong. It's very subtle. But you can see how the color is creeping into those mushrooms in the closet. And the cabbages are slightly green. That's good artwork. I like that. Some days later, Mrs. Katz's downstairs neighbor, Mr. Hopkins, turned on a faucet and got hot and cold running sweet potato vines. Above his head, he could see carrots popping through the ceiling, and he became furious. "Either that garden up there goes or I go," he screamed at old MacDonald. But old MacDonald really didn't care. He had begun to feel that in some ways vegetables made better tenants than people. Carrots didn't smudge brass doorknobs. Cucumbers didn't leave muddy footprints in the halls. And potatoes didn't bang on the radiators for more steam. So, Mr. Angry Hopkins moved out. Remember how the colors of the vegetables are seeping into our artwork? Everything else is black and white. But in this funny picture of the carrots growing down from the ceiling, you can see the orange. The orange of the carrots. Well, a variety of vegetables, a field of clover, and a cow moved in. No one knew what old MacDonald was doing, but you can't keep a cow in an apartment a secret for very long. Indeed not. Look at that. They're looking through, trying to hear through the walls. And the cow's munching, and maybe once in a while going, "Moo." More and more people moved out because they were very disgusted with what was happening. So more vegetables, fruits, trees, and cows and chickens took their place. And finally, every tenant in the building had moved out, and the apartment became a 4-story farm. Take a look at some of those pictures. And remember, this is an apartment building. It's pretty funny to see such a thing happening. All the people moved out, and each time a person moved out, he reappropriated each apartment, and he put different things in there, like a farmer would. You see the picture where the cows' heads are sticking out watching the people moving? Or maybe, as the cow would say, they're moving. Okay. So then one day, fat Mr. Rental, the owner, stopped by to check on the house and collect the rent money, as he did every few months. And when he saw that his tenants had been replaced by vegetables, fruit trees, cows, and chickens, he got upset. Very upset. "Look here, Mr. MacDonald, what have you done?" This is what he shouted. "Where are the families? All that's here now are bushels of fruits and vegetables and herds of cows and flocks of chickens, and they can't pay me any rent." Can you see Mr. Rental? Yeah. Old MacDonald and his wife were very sad. They knew they would have to leave. Fat Mr. Rental told them so, and in fact, he was going to have the whole farm thrown out into the street. And old MacDonald told his wife not to cry near her tomato plant because the salt water wouldn't be good for it. Besides, it would set a bad example for the cows. Now, fat Mr. Rental paced back and forth and quickly in front of the house. He was very upset and not really sure that he liked the idea of throwing the farm out into the street. Old MacDonald had been such a good super, and now not only was he without tenants, but he's also without a super as well. Who ever heard of a farm in the middle of the city? That's absurd, he muttered. Or is it? Maybe a farm could pay my rent after all. Do you see something down here that's growing, that's round? Do you know what that is? Those are cantaloupe, or as some parts of the country call it, musk melons. The next morning, old MacDonald and his wife stepped outside the house carrying their suitcases, and in the middle of the front walk, fat Mr. Rental was building a store. There was a big sign that read, Rental and MacDonald's Fruits and Vegetables, Fresh Milk and Eggs Hourly. Fat Mr. Rental waved at old MacDonald and shouted, Where are you going there, partner? You grow the stuff and I'll sell it. Vegetables will pay me rent after all. Do you see how Mr. Rental is almost floating up like a balloon at the Macy's parade for Thanksgiving? And look at his eyes. He's got crazy eyes. On opening day, the store was jammed, and fat Mr. Rental made a very long speech in which he asked everyone to come in very often and buy as much as they could. He asked old MacDonald to say a few words, and he did. He said, People, I'm here and happy to have such fine vegetables as tenants, and I hope you agree that good vegetables make good neighbors. The people applauded and then began to buy as much as they could. They came back every day, and both the store and the farm thrived throughout the summer and the fall. And even in winter, when the earth outside was frozen and covered with snow, things were still growing on the steam-heated farm. That's pretty creative, I think. This is a good story. Would you like to visit an apartment building like this that was filled with animals and food to eat? It's very creative. And so at the end, it says that the author and the artist both grew up in apartment buildings in New York City, and they're married, and they make books for children. Thanks for coming and listening with me to this story. Your mission for the day is to be kind to others, wash your hands, brush your teeth, and be well.